We'll show up later, some audience swap or something like that. But we want to touch base on a couple of things that make this group work when it comes to arranging, composing, and also just finding what to do that is fresh and that would allow us to continue on a creative path without repeating ourselves so much. Even though that last part is a third party that will have to dictate that. Anyway, but the first thing I'd like to pick your brain with is, as we play this music, some of the questions that I would like you to be thinking of is, what does it mean to have an identity? What does it mean to belong to a culture and participate in it? What does it mean to have a nationality? Is there any difference or is there not? And if a composer is from a specific place and he makes music from another place, is the music from that other place or from the place from the composer is? And so with that, we're gonna continue and play a jazz standard rendition with a change of style that will include some of the things we use from Antillean rhythms and Central American rhythms. So this is Body and Soul in bachata style. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any questions or any comments or any curiosities about what you hear or see on stage, please step up and let's converse about it. This is as much as a performance as it is just a moment to share what we do as artists and also as individuals. We dedicate our lives to art, but the learning process is about listening to each other and coexisting, right? In this space that we were given to coexist with nature. On that line, we're going to change latitudes once more just to showcase another kind of mixture of styles, this time with Brazilian music. So some of the things you've been listening here in the percussion section and the bass might be repeated with a different flavor with the Brazilian music. The syncopations are similar, but different groups of syncopations were in the same way coexisting together in the original rhythms in Africa, but when people got separated like that in the slavery during those times, then a portion of a rhythm arrived to Central America and the rest of the rhythm arrived to South America. And the other parts of the drums that belonged to that original style, they were all spread in the Antilles. So new kinds of music were born out of those small fragments that resembled the original music. And you're gonna find that in Brazilian music, Puerto Rican, Cuban music, some of the Colombian versions of salsa, even Venezuelan music, it's all over the place. That's why we can recognize each other in those sounds and dance in the same way and feel the music in a very similar way. And it shares all that with jazz here in the United States. Because some of the same places and some of the same rhythms got here, but they evolved to become swing, to become big band music, and to become all this other absolutely unique kind of music that is still connected to ours. Now what we do in this group is about building a bridge between the two so that it can sound like everything at the same time, but in a cohesive way. I don't know the level of success of that. I think it depends on, from creation to creation, but eventually you end up in the search realizing and materializing very important things, for that learning process. So this is going to be This I Dig of You in Brazilian style, merging two styles named Partido Alto and Samba. And maybe if we look at each other in the right place, we might change it to swing too. But if there's anything you could say about Partido Alto,
yeah.
But just
say it now, do I want to say after?
Now.
No?
It depends. Maybe point out some things they can listen to when we play that are essential to
let's talk about it after, sure.
And also, we'll go back to the bachata pattern because I see bongos, and I want to invite Aldo to play some bachata, and also I see you have some auxiliary percussion. It would be nice also to play some bachata and use those instruments. But we can come back to it.
Yep, sure.
You might have Okay. So some of you who know the original version for this song might feel some of the differences, but the fact of the matter is that these would all need to be called jazz. Although there's an inconvenience of using just one term to denote an entire class of music. You know, if you say jazz, are you referring to swing music from 20s big band music? Are you referring to bebop? Are you referring to post-bop or something else? And a much modern style, and you're talking about snarky poppy, and that's like a fusion thing, but post-fusion. So it's very specific. When you just say jazz, it just means an entire class of rhythms that go with each other. The same goes for salsa. If I say, oh, this is salsa music, well, salsa music is comprised of all the Cuban music, son montuno, descarga, guajira, cha-cha, all of that merged together, and then later on, because it needed to be sold, it was called salsa, same thing with jazz and all its expressions. So at some point in the 20th century, it's just better to refer to each individual composer and improviser as their own style, instead of trying to make this umbrella to cover all of them. Because the subtleties between two composers or two improvisers from the same period are so much that it doesn't even make sense that they belong to the same aesthetic, so to speak. So when we incorporate those ideas here, the idea is that we have complete freedom of including any of those styles, whether they are played historically accurate or not, they all belong to what we're doing here without really discriminating if it belongs or not to Brazilian vernacular music. So what Ross brings here is his experience as a jazz musician, and also, you know, your upbringing has to do with a different location in the country, and that also makes its way in the way he perceives, listens, composes, and, you know, improvises when he joins us. We are not requiring of him to necessarily play only with the vocabulary that belongs to this Latin American music, but he can bring his own, and it can all sound coherent. is this making sense for those of you that, who deal with music, whether listening to it or playing it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there you go. So the more you relate to other styles, the more you're prone to participate of that culture as well. You know, all it takes is the effort of connecting to that which is unknown. And I think it's in that way that we've come to work together like that. Because, you know, before we even met, we were doing very different things, each of us. For example, Alex and I met at school, but we were doing separate degrees, and, you know, we had separate social circles. But then in the interest of making a musical project where all these things came to the same place, that's when this thing just started. And then with the addition of new musicians, new musical elements are added as well, and the sound changes. It sounds from here, but it sounds from Brazil, it sounds from Honduras, from Colombia, from you know, southern or northern Brazil. It gets to that specificity. With that in mind, let's try to do.
Gabriel has some, some
please.
insight on the particular.
Yeah, so to talk about Brazilian music, I think we best leave that to the expert, Gabriel Borin.
No expert by any means, but just he was talking about that and the concept of jazz as a whole, and I personally face that struggle sometimes because when I came to the U.S., we first met in Mississippi, where we were going to school together, and there we had a very diverse department in general, so we kind of spoke the same language. But when you are outside and you have like a majority of American musicians in a department of jazz, jazz starts to mean something very specific, especially in the academic setting. And that was one of my shocks when I moved out of that department. And I started talking about jazz, and then I was talking about a few of my influences, and people would look at me and be like, yeah, but that's not jazz. That's cool, but that's not jazz. And in a sense, what we try to bring when we play together is that broader definition of what jazz can be, in a sense. Because a lot of the music, a lot of Brazilian instrumental music, a lot of Caribbean instrumental music, Central America, kind of share the same roots in terms of in terms of like, hey, we have this form, we have this song that we created, this is the form, let's improvise over it. We share kind of those same roots, in a sense, of what jazz, and then since jazz became so influential in our countries with harmonies and whatnot, it was simply easier for every instrumental musician to just call it jazz. It was simpler that way. And there is something about like now going to Brazilian music specifically, into the partido alto thing. Brazilian music in general is not an instrumental tradition. Jazz grew up out of New Orleans second line instrumental music. You have horns, that's why we play in so many flats. That's why like we play Body and Soul, which is in D flat. Nobody plays in D flat in Brazil. Like Brazilian music, if you look at the repertoire, is in like D major, A major, E major, because those are keys that are simpler to play in a guitar. Those are keys that are simpler to play in other instruments. So, and it's a voice-oriented tradition. It's not an instrumental tradition. So, partido alto, the genre itself, it's not a genre of instrumental music. It is a genre of singing, and it is a genre of improvised singing. It's similar to what hip hop became to the US. In a sense, like you were supposed to be able to rap, and in Brazil it was similar. So usually we would have a verse that everybody would sing in choir, and then somebody would improvise a verse on top of that, and then a chorus, and then a verse. And partido alto means the literal translation is to have a high status. So you have a high partido. Alto, high, partido, fame, right? So you have a high status if you can improvise. That's basically what that music was about. You can improvise verse, you can improvise lyrics on there. And when I come to this setting, they approach, and I have the same problem when I play like Caribbean music or Latin American with salsa. Because I will play in a certain style, and I know it's not like authentic salsa, but I do my best. The same way I approach jazz. I know I'm not a son of that tradition, but I do what I can to fit in. And when I started playing, it happened today, like when we started playing This I Dig of You, this rhythm, excuse me. So that. I can count in Brazil how many times I played that, and I can count in one hand when I played that, because that's not how we play. We would probably play something like, if I were playing the bass line, I would probably be playing something like that. Let me see. Because we have this other genre that's called Ijexá, which has this 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's how we would play it. But I know when I'm out of that, the Brazilian context, I know when they refer to partido alto, I know that this is what I need to play. Because that's the way they understand it.
That's the way we learn in America.
Yeah, exactly.
Like drummers, that's the partido alto, like the basic of partido
exactly.
alto. Yeah, there are many variations, but that's the first one.
Yeah. It's just like when those genres started becoming more global, I feel like the understanding varies a lot. For example, I will pick up a lead sheet from a Brazilian bossa nova or whatever, and if it's printed in the US, I know it will be in 4/4, which no Brazilian composer writes in 4/4. They write in 2/4. We never understand 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. If you're playing a samba, we're not 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. We are playing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Why? Because it's a march and we have 2 feet. So 1, 2, 1, 2. We don't have 4. So it's like those differences when those genres become a global thing and they migrate, like they understand differently. And to use an American analogy, I feel like this group, in a lot of ways, every time I played with it's this gumbo, you just put stuff in. We understand a little bit differently everything, but in the end, we're just trying to make music together.
Yeah,
that's a lot of what happens.
I think it has to do with how dialects can still allow us to communicate with each other, even though we don't belong to the same dialect, but we know it's a dialect. We know it has a certain flavor and a certain intention, and then we follow on that. But as we are connected, because we're Latin Americans, that's why we can read from each other like that. Now, when it comes to interacting with contrasting cultures, so to speak, I think the pivot point for where the experience is similar to everybody is when you dance to something. Whether it's a waltz, a Polish or Viennese waltz, or is some hip hop track or something, like a party kind of music or Latin American music, you teach your body to move to the sound and to reflect what the rhythms do to you. If you have that ability, you have the ability to connect with any dialect or perceive it and learn it, because it's all a matter of teaching your body what to do with that new dialect. Then again, some things require just recommending a bunch of albums, listen to this stuff because they speak it this way. So when you learn a different language, you go on and you listen to people speaking that language as well in different contexts, formal, informal, fantastic stories or just simpler narratives. You try to listen to every single utilization of the different vocabulary pieces. With music, it's the same. If you are studying bebop, you learn that, and then you apply that phrase to every context that you can apply it to. And if you have to modify it so that it applies to different kinds of chords, it's still the same phrase. So you're using a piece of vocabulary and then you're conjugating it in different contexts. That's how someone like Ross, for example, who has the love for the music and has contact with it from the composer side, then when he wants to reach out for a different style that he wants to incorporate. That's more or less the process. I think if you can speak a little bit of how, when you try to incorporate these rhythms in your music, what you have in mind, and then what sorts of freedom you give to musicians once you know they speak that dialect. Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I get one thing I kind of was thinking about when we first started was I kind of do a majority of my composing for the jazz big band, and I don't know, I've composed for a lot of different types of groups and stuff, but for me that's the one that I feel like I can create the most expression with. And a lot of times I'll end up, you know, I'm working on, like right now I'm working on this suite that's very, I guess, kind of Americana folk inspired music, but there are certain contexts, like in you know, one of the pieces, for example, where I kind of mix rhythms of folk music. Alex, could you demonstrate like a brush train on the snare?
We can play the beginning. Are you thinking of going to some?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I
I think I remember you talking.
Just like a brush train, like kind of that folk groove, you know. Right. So that's a very kind of common pattern you would hear on a snare drum in folk music. And that was what I'm from Montana originally, so I think one of the things I kind of bring as a composer is what influenced me from a very young age, and that was folk and country and rock music and all the stuff that I was exposed to growing up in a live setting, because that's what was being played in a live setting a lot of times around that area. But also from a young age, I don't know where this came from. My parents didn't really listen to jazz in the house or anything, but I heard it somewhere when I was maybe around 8 years old. And I heard the saxophone and I said, that's what I want to do, you know. And I started getting records and learning the language for all these years now. I haven't put the horn down since then. So, but going back to kind of the composition side of things, as I learned more about Latin styles, and I know that's a huge umbrella term, and I'm still nowhere near what I would like to know about them, but that brush train groove that's used a lot in folk music reminds me, and maybe they're not similar at all, I don't know, but it reminds me a lot of samba music.
Well, let's play the same beginning and just think it's a samba and change the accent. Just let's play it as a samba. You're gonna find that it's just a paraphrasing of the previous rhythm you heard.
It's, in my case, like since the pattern is different, it sounds more like a baião to me, which is from Brazil.
Right. So, kind of the idea there is that you can really kind of mix those rhythms together. So this piece that I wrote that they were just playing the intro of, I ended up mixing like a lot of kind of traditional folk rhythms and instruments. Like originally this piece, it has acoustic guitar and violin and accordion mixed with big band. And I actually, when USF played this piece, Julián did a big melodica feature on it. It was really cool. So I wanted to, when we did, USF played this piece, we did a big feature for both of these guys. And I just thought it was kind of interesting to, collaborate with them and work on combining the styles of kind of traditional folk music and traditional folk instruments, but with kind of some more traditional Latin styles. So that's something I have been trying to do a lot in my music, but I take influence from. Thanks. other things too. Like I take a lot of inspiration from kind of traditional classical music as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that you brought that up.
Let's do something. Let's play that same beginning, but let's do an exercise. What do we need to do to make it sound more Brazilian, and what do we need to do to make it sound more like Americana, like what he said, right? But without actually speaking it, just let's play it. So let's do a more Brazilian version of the same group. Yeah, let's remember that it has the subdivision of the baião and it's driven by that rhythm, but then we might just make it easier, make it feel like that. Let's do a high.
Oh, you want to do the folk first?
No, do it like that song.
Ah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
What do we need to do to make it more, to feel more like country and western, well not country and west, but less Brazilian, so to speak.
Yeah, more like, oh, like 1, 2, 3.
Sometimes, and I think this is a mutual struggle, sometimes I can't find what belongs to the dialect. So I start playing my own, and that's why you go to school, right?
Same here, I changed the field.
Exactly.
It's hard for me to go back to the straight 16 notes.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking of the triple.
But there is a difference in what the music and how the music moves when you have the intent of making it more towards the Brazilian, idiosyncrasy, so to speak, or more towards the country music idiosyncrasy, and specifically with what Ross grew up with, that it also includes a great deal of folk rock and things like Bob Dylan, I'm guessing, Johnny Mitchell. I know you're a fan of Steely Dan.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things make their way into the music, but we can still decide if they're going to sound Brazilian or Cuban or Puerto Rican. It's all a matter of changing the phrasing and the dialect. Please.
Yeah, like speaking in more technical terms, like if you are in a Brazilian, we call it samba schools, where basically like big agglomeration of people that just like represent a specific group, and they just like have this major parades and carnival. That's what we call samba schools. So if you go to a parade, they will have a section of the percussion ensemble that we call tamborins, which are basically these hand drums, and you would play something like, you would usually play, the right hand would play something like that. And what happens in the left hand is that you make a turn, usually in the third 16. So you would hear you would hear the turn.
Could you do that rhythm and then we play?
No, but that's the thing. Like
okay.
if you go to Brazilian music, for example, what tends to happen to the 16 note is that there is a joke among classical musicians in Brazil that whenever you bring like Mahler to a Brazilian orchestra, we never play the 16s right. Because we never subdivide the 16s the way they're supposed to be subdivided. But that's just like because of the way we play. So just a demonstration, what tends to happen in Brazilian music is that the 16 notes are kind of like somewhere between a triplet and a 16th note. So something like this happens. So let's say this is my right hand and the tambourine, and I'm playing the. Like it's not a you're hearing it's almost like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So whenever I go like play something like that, and then he said, oh, play the country. I need to, okay, the accent would be on the upbeat, and I would probably need to make this a little more straight. In my head, that's what's going on. I'm like, ding, 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 ding. That's what I'm trying to think. But I know that I will speak with, the same way I speak English, I will speak with an accent, in a degree, you know? I try my best, but I know eventually people will be like, haha, that's a disguised Brazilian bass player playing country. Something like that, you know?
So another thing is what you do when you realize that some of the things you usually play with in a style don't belong there. As in, not that you can't play them there, but if what you're trying is to be authentic and pay respect to the initial tradition before you deviate from it, then I would like you to speak about when you're asked to play Brazilian groups in a big band setting, because the chart says, for example, jazz samba or something like that. What do you not do that belongs to Brazilian music that does fit in the big band world?
What I don't do?
Yeah, what kind of thing you know belongs to Brazilian music but you cannot use in the big band setting because it's not what it's looking for. Yet it calls it jazz samba, for example.
Well, first, like the subdivision, I'll be aware of that. If the band is not like playing like the figures like this in the style of, I can play Brazilian on the drums because it will sound uneven, right?
Let's try something. Can we play the intro for Yatrata and do two versions? Do jazz samba, as in the United States jazz samba, and then do Brazilian samba.
Yeah.
And let's see if it's that obvious of a difference.
Let's see if we can do a difference.
So jazz samba first. Jazz samba. Persuasion. So what differences were you able to perceive? Did something go harder, was something lighter, was something heavier? What can you say about that?
The second one was harder.
So did you feel it had more drive or, okay. So it walks more forward, whereas jazz samba tries to be more vertical. It's not that one is better than the other, but it's just that one fits a specific setting and the other one another specific setting.
Yeah. One untold, is this one? One untold story about this group, like for a period, a semester or so, I was your teacher.
Yeah. He was my combo teacher.
Me too, man.
I was the jazz TA for the department where we were. And I would face that problem a lot for me. Like, I would get a tune, or my supervisor would suggest a tune for us to play in a big band. And I would get the tune and it would say like, samba. And then I would look at it and I'm listening to it and I'm like, okay, this is not samba. Okay, what can I do to make that happen? You know, or what is it? Do I want to fix that, or do I want to play the way they play? So, for example, I remember a few occasions where I would grab a tune, and then the piano part had a small montuno, and it was called bossa nova, and I'm like, oh my God. Wait, or stuff of that nature. So, for example, one thing that for drummers that I always told them that that happens here in the U.S., but it is an adaptation. It's like let's say an American translation of Brazilian rhythms is the way they play the ride cymbal. So for example, if you ask a Brazilian drummer to play samba, and they will play the right cymbal, they will play straight 16.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how fast it is, it's straight 16. In jazz, when they will play the tin, right? That's jazz. But when the samba came to the US, how were they used to play the right cymbal? Tin, 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 tin. Okay, so let's make that straight. So you see an American playing samba, you will see a ting, 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 ting.
Yeah.
You will see that pattern just straighten up. A lot of books published here in the US will put samba like that, but you go to Brazil, and nobody plays like that. Another thing that happens a lot as well is like the concept of, the problem of putting everything under a big umbrella, like putting Latin music, that I see happening is that like if you go to Caribbean music, salsa, guaguancó, you name it, that branch of music is written on top of a clave. So a clave, if you think about in Spanish, you clava something. If you clava something, you don't move. That's static. You're putting that ground and you're not leaving it.
Yeah,
so
clave is to nail.
Exactly.
That's what it means.
To nail something. In Brazilian music, that's not the case. But a lot of times, in pedagogy, in jazz pedagogy in general, they will say, oh, Brazilian music has a clave, so this is a samba in 3/2, and then every single Brazilian will look at you and like, what? Because that's not how we think about music. Brazilian music has some rhythmic structures, but those rhythmic structures are flexible, in a sense. They're not nailing, and they won't stay.
The difference between Cuban music and Brazilian is Cuban music will not change the clave, it will not make it interact with any other rhythms that would be called a clave. But in Brazilian music, they all participate at the same time. They don't have a problem with that. And in a way, Cuban music is purist in that way. The arrangement that you develop for your composition needs to fit with the rhythm of the clave. And some rhythms will not work, and they'll tell you that's off. That's off. Adjust it to this clave. So for example, I think let's play a tune that uses some of the Cuban rhythms. So please, let's welcome to the stage Aldo. Aldo will play bongo. We're going to give him a little bit of a solo. He's going to have to improvise in the context of a clave, and whatever rhythms he chooses to do with it have to fit with the syncopations of the clave. So, you know, what, one, two,
we got Weirdo too.
It's yours. Whatever he plays needs to fall with these beats right here. And his phrasing needs to follow the repetition of the clave as well. And yes, sir, please bring whatever instruments you want.
Yeah, he got class.
I was going to offer to anybody who.
No, come.
please play yourself. Please play yourself. Yeah, and if somebody has more instruments that you want to participate here, hey, I have 2 keyboards here. I only have 2 hands. If somebody wants to play keyboard, please welcome yourself to the stage.
Yes.
Let's do.
I remember when I was in Cuba, I was noticing that when a band leader was getting ready, he would just begin to play.
Yeah, that's the count of, because it's not.
Off anything. They
It's
just
not in
back.
4/4 either. The 4/4 phenomenon is when you have to read something. That's why it exists, is for reading purposes, but it never reflects how the music feels. The bar line really doesn't exist in any kind of music. Maybe rock music, but still, when you write it down, it doesn't look like that.
I hope I don't put the wrong thing on.
No, you did not, but that's a very important point, because what they're thinking of is not 1, 2, 3, 4, is that. And so they play like that so that everybody knows when to come in. When you do 1, 2, 3, 4 with Cuban musicians, they're like, what are you doing? You know, like, count with the clave. You just got, you know, we do 1, 2, yeah, right? But the 1, 2, 3, 4 will confuse them, because that subdivision does not belong to the music. So that's a very important remark you made there, sir. Let me think. Let's do. Yeah, all the things you are.
All the things you are, or other names.
So the thing, it would need to be this one.
Too fast?
I don't think. Oh,
That's good.
Yeah, let's do rumba clave. And let me talk a little bit about the rumba and songo clave. So, what he just did, he was trying to fit in which clave could go on that tune. And he tried first the songo clave, which is. So the third beat will be 1, 2, 2, and then the rumba clave there is a upbeat. Instead of doing on the beat tree on the second measure will be. Yep. So that's the two difference between the songo and the rumba clave. And for this case, we decided to use rumba because it fits more on with the melody, right, and the harmony.
yes. However, he's playing it. So,
Well,
which
if
one
he
are we
plays
gonna
songo,
use? Show us the clave that we're supposed to use.
yeah.
No. See, if you talk about the rumba, is it? And then the other one is,
Yes.
Yes.
okay, so which one do you prefer?
You choose. We have to adapt to what you propose.
To what I do?
Yeah. And that includes tempo. So however fast you want this, you also call it from the clave.
Okay, and now I thought, but I'll use the second one.
All right. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Aldo. What's your name? What's your name?
My name's Eric.
Eric.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Eric. Thanks for playing with us. So, Eric, one of the things you might have noticed also in your experience with Cuban music, some music is about waiting for the beat, for the beat. Like, for example, Count Basie, the Count Basie Orchestra waits for the beat until it comes to it and then swings with it. So it's always trying to walk back. Not drag the tempo, but it's laid back. It's not on the beat. This kind of music, and I think this applies for most Latin American, and especially the things related with the Caribbean, is going to push forward, always, because you have to keep people dancing. And in that spirit, it's always going to be more agitated, never less. So I think that's very common in Cuban music and Puerto Rican music. It has that because it's made for the dancer, then it has to be high voltage all the time. So if you have to decide as an accompanying musician whether to follow the beat on top, lead it basically instead of following, or waiting for it, always choose to push forward. If you are talking Cuban and Latin, Afro-Latin music, it pushes forward. Right? But that was very good because that's the skeleton for the entire thing. If the clave falls, we don't know where we are. That's how important it is. That's why it's clave. It's nailed here and the entire arrangement flourishes from there. That was a very good demonstration. Thank you so much. Please give a hand everybody to Eric.
Do you have any other instrumentalists?
If anyone else wants to jump in and play, or if someone has a question or a comment,
Please.
you thought of something after this conversation, you want to share it, we're here for you.
Is this instrument particularly affiliated with Puerto Rican music?
So you're going to find that, I'm going to say most of Central America, the Antilles, basically,
Or Dominican.
and Dominican
Yes,
Republic here.
Yeah, that instrument is used mainly for merengue style,
The-
and that's guira, and the guiro is the other one that you got over there on top, and which is Puerto Rican.
So these are if you have to categorize them, these are the scratchers. This is the family of scratchers.
Mhm.
So you have different textures. They give you different sounds, but they also come from different places, and they're using different manifestations of music. So the metallic one you see is going to be used in something like
Merengue, bachata.
let's play a merengue like the one in the party.
Oh, so yeah, I will imitate what it sounds on the wheel here.
One, two.
Let's try a little bit slower, but yeah, that's it.
That's
Can-
the rhythm.
can you start
Can
your
you
part?
come to the stage, please? Could step up to the stage.
Yeah, this is it. Sorry.
The small instruments are the ones leading almost always in this kind of. It's never the big ones. It's always the small instruments, the ones that have the patterns that don't change, that drive the entire skeleton of the arrangement. So let's try that. Let's choose the tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so those two are just things that you would do as variations.
Yes.
You know, at some point, if the song is going, there's a fill in the percussion section, and then it gets tighter or hotter, or it cooks more, or all of those expressions. Then you change to downbeats, and it's like sa sa sa.
Yeah. And like a form, like term speaking, it will be like A will be and B will be quarter notes, you know, and then you go to A and then that's how the form will be on guitar.
And I think the equivalent of that in swing music is whenever you have, for example, a right pattern that you're accompanying for a solo, and then the next time you go through the form, you at the crossbeat, so your first time you're doing sing, and of course 2, 3, 4, so you have things that you change, add or take to make something happen in the music. In the case of what you were doing just now, you change to downbeats to make your part simpler, but that makes the music more active. So I think it's the same. I mean, not 100% of the time, but I think the spirit of this kind of thing happening is very common in all of Latin American and Afro-Caribbean music. Yeah, thank you so much. Do you have another instrument? All right, this way. Okay, very good. So that was merengue. That was something from Dominican Republic. Also popular in Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, and then all of Colombia, all of Venezuela. It's one of our most precious rhythms, merengue. It has a version in every country, pretty much. But with this one, we're going to play something more on the Puerto Rican side of things. Let's do a lounge version of Niño Cabrón. Later.
Yeah, let's start.
We can start with the rhythm section. Show us the rhythm you would play there.
Well, I'm not familiar with that particular. I'll just show you the simple rhythm that I started understanding like this.
There it is. There it is. And it's only how much you make when you drag it. Yeah. That's but always keep in touch. Yeah. And if you feel it moving the same, you're playing it right. There you go. Some of the melody.
Oh, sorry.
1, 2, So that's more on the Puerto Rican side.
Yes.
Don't quote me on this, but if you must pick up on the difference between Cuban music and Puerto Rican music. Puerto Rican music tries to groove more and stay in the groove. It feels good, so we stay here feeling good, right? Cuban music needs to just get crazier all the time. It just needs to get up there the entire time and never yield. I think you're gonna find that especially in modern versions of timba, which is, Cuban music is not to be called salsa, they let you know very assertively. They call it timba, and it's a different kind of music, but you're gonna find that a lot in timba. Timba starts like this and always climbs up in energy, never yielding, never yielding. But this song that we just played, the original tempo for this song, so it's meant to be way, way faster, but because we're working within that style, if we play it slow grooves, that works as well,
All right.
right? Very nice. Thank you so much for your
Thank you, Eric.
participation. We still have some time, so any questions about anything that we've discussed so far? All right, let us continue with our performance then. Do you guys want to play the full Niño Cabrón to demonstrate? This is the original version of the song we just played here. So although it follows the same intention, it's just made to be faster. Unfortunately, we won't have the wheel going on here at double time, but it is meant to have the congas, the bongos. What happened with the bongo? Yeah.
I think you had to leave.
Oh, all right. It's supposed to have clave, congas, bongo, timbales, maracas, right? All these instruments that is what make the music. They're not usually played from the drum set, but drummers have found a way of synthesizing what happens in all these different instruments and just play it all there. So it sounds virtually the same. But when you have both families of instruments, the Latin percussion and the drum set, they all arrange their parts so that everyone just takes care of one side of the texture. Whether it's the high end, the cymbal stuff, or the low end, the heavy drumming things. They all talk with each other, playing music so that no one steps on each other's toes. So the first listen through, if you're not familiar with this kind of music, you might hear like it's really fast and it's really loud and it sounds chaotic, but then the more you learn how to dance to it, the more you realize all those rhythms are actually going together. And it doesn't follow the verticality of other kinds of dances, especially those influenced by Western European tradition. But those that are not influenced by that are going to move differently, just in how the music walks. I like that reference. I think we learned that from Jovino, right? Jovino Santos. He was speaking about, this is a Brazilian musician, very important in Brazilian music and also in how it's come to the United States. But he talks about how the music should look if it walked, right? Does it look cool? Does it look stressed? Does it look happy? Does it look depressed? That tells you exactly what the intention is for what you want to play, if you want to express yourself, because we all walk. So that's just something for you to think while we play this, to see if you can catch how this music will walk. song has reached a partido alto texture, even though we said it was the Puerto Rican style. So this section is in Brazilian style, with the variation that Gabriel had mentioned, the way you play it over there, right? Yet when we composed this, we never thought it was going to be a partido alto, we just wanted the rhythm. So a lot of the times you won't know how to call this stuff at all, but you know how it sounds, right? That's another kind of successful composition. So when it comes to being free, there really isn't any rules to composition other than what styles you want to merge together and how much you know about them. If you don't have information about those styles, it's going to sound like I'm trying to speak English from watching movies without the subtitles and just like following the sounds of what they say. So if someone says, I love you, I do, I love you, right? If someone says, oh, it's so hot today, I'll be, right? If I do that kind of thing, then I'm not going to convey the meaning of that vocabulary. And that's how this kind of thing works. So, Strauser on the saxophone, everybody. Gabriel Borin on bass. Gabriel Borin on bass. I could not think of a different name and play at the same time. Alex Ocón on percussion. And this has been Sandujazz. Thank you so much, everybody.
Julián Pernett on keyboards. Let's give it up with this guy. Thank you. And don't forget to scan our QR code if you want to keep it up with us and what we're doing in the next following year. Yeah.
To finish up, I think, I don't think printing handouts for everybody would be helpful nowadays, but we would like to leave you with a list of music to explore yourself so that all that we said today makes more sense. So I think the best way to go about it is how I learned to write those names. It was just asking how they were spelled. So if you can write these names down and explore by yourselves, I think you're on to a great treat for yourself if you go listen to this music. Number one artist is going to be Hermeto Pascual. This is H-E-R-M-E-T-O. Hermeto, that's one word. Pascual, P-A-S-C-O-A-L.
I will add one to the list.
Yes, please.
Milton Banana Trio.
Yes,
sir.
Yeah.
Just quick word about those two. They're Brazilians, those two artists. Hermeto is very important. He developed this philosophy and this genre that he calls universal music, which is exactly that concept of like a music that's branched out and embraces everything, embraces the universe of music. And it's very experimental in a sense, but in a lot of ways it's very beautiful what he can do with it. So, and the other one, Milton Banana. Milton Banana is a particularly important one in a sense because he's a drummer, but it was a time when like American music was becoming a thing of international trade in a sense, so like it was everywhere in the like mid 50s, 60s, and we had samba, and Milton Banana was one of those guys, and they're like, okay, if we put the piano trio thing into Brazilian music, what happens? So it was like drums, bass, and piano, and that was it.
So
that
you
was
mean
not something that we would see in Brazilian music.
so during that time, it was probably Bill Evans and Oscar Peterson playing piano trio. So the idea was to take that,
Yeah.
but do it with Brazilian rhythms.
Yeah.
and their own repertoire, you know, Tom Jobim songs and all this short of repertoire that they already had at that point. Something of the Nuyorican salsa explosion of the 70s, and I think that's very important because it's going to show you the influence of big band music into that area. Ray Barretto, that's Ray as in Raymond, and his last name B-A-R-R-E-T-T-O, Barretto. If you listen to his early albums, you're going to find a lot of 70s influence in it. And then his later albums, he dove into the world of Latin jazz and developed certain things before the thing was even called Latin jazz. So in the end, you're going to find a lot of collaborations with different groups in Europe and the United States that feature Ray Barretto on the congas. But previous decades, you're going to find his own music that is to be called salsa, legitimately speaking. And so that you can make a contrast for Cuban music, let's talk about Peruchin and Cachao. If you only Google these two names, an album that is a compilation will show up, and it's a compilation of music, Cuban music from before 1970, I think. So this is, yes, Cachao and Peruchin. So Cachao is C-A-C-H-A-O, Cachao. That's a bass player. Israel Cachao, one of the biggest Cuban bass players. And Peruchin is P-E-R-U-C-H-I-N, Peruchin. This is one of the first people that invented a style of piano that would reduce the string parts that this music was usually played on to the keyboard. So it's one of the first pianists of Cuban music. This is a compilation of many kinds of genres of Cuban music. But I think it's interesting because you get a big variety that you can compare to the music of Barretto and later on. And you will find that even though it's the same rhythms, it just has a very different intention to it. And I think this is very clear. One of them tries to be wilder and the other one is just trying to groove. Right? Lastly, American artists that play with all sorts of styles, no matter where they come from. And there's quite a few selection of them, but I'm going to limit myself to my favorite ones, of course. And if you have other names, please suggest them. For Cuban music or Puerto Rican?
I still have one for Cuban music.
All right.
Check out Mongo Santa Maria for sure,
Oh, yes.
if you want to listen to like jazz and Cuban music fusion.
Can you spell it?
Yeah.
Mongo, M-O-N-G-O, Santa, S-A-N-T-A, Maria, M-A-R-I-A.
How about Poncho Sanchez?
Poncho Sanchez
Yes,
is 2 generations after Mongo Santa Maria, so it carries that tradition, absolutely. But Poncho Sanchez operated in a world that already had Latin jazz. So it already was there. Mongo Santa Maria played in a scene that later on people started calling, oh, that must be Latin jazz.
As
So
well as Chano Pozo.
Well, Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie, I think that's pretty known by now, but the collaboration between those two musicians was about Dizzy Gillespie finding out what Cuban rhythms were about, right? That's what the entire collaboration was, and his way of showing jazz musicians how to play them, and that's an entirely different branch of what happened to those rhythms. We didn't touch base on that, but that's an entire workshop onto itself, how jazz musicians perceived these rhythms and develop other kinds of music from them that sound completely different, but the rhythms are the inspiration for those. Yeah. With Mongo Santa Maria, what you're going to hear, just 1 minute, is he's an African master percussionist. So he plays bata drums, and he comes from Nigeria. What he does is bringing that to the salsa explosion. That was also electrifying itself with electric guitars and electric pianos and all these effects and the new technological advancements. So you're going to listen to the merging of what was happening in the world at that time. It's just people trying to get here and work together and survive. But also the recording industry just exploding and saying yes to everything. They were just saying yes to everything for the risk of it. And I think that changed a lot nowadays. So if you listen to this music, you're going to understand why today nothing sounds like that. It's because people are willing to take less of a risk when it comes to mixing things up, right? But you had a question, sir.
Yeah, the Cuban Nights,
Cuban Lights?
Cuban Nights.
Cuban Nights?
Yeah. Cuban.
Nights with a K?
Yeah. Oh, no. N-I,
Nights.
G-H-T.
I don't know if I'm familiar with that. Have you heard that?
No.
It's Cuban,
Mhm.
yeah.
What year, what time period we're talking about here?
I don't exactly know, but they did a song called Bamboleo.
Bamboleo, that's timba right there. So we're talking 90s, end of 70s into the 20th, 21st century pretty much. That's timba right there. That's timba. So that's a good example along with Alain Perez. I think it would be a nice example of timba. Alain is A-L-A-I-N. Perez, P-E-R-E-Z. And touching base on the musician from the US that opens to all this experimentation. I think Dizzy Gillespie would be one of them for the jazz world. For the rock world and experimental music, Frank Zappa is the guy to go and listen to. The paradigm of, what is it? Anything, anywhere, anytime, for no reason at all. Under that aesthetic, I think you can be pretty much free. You're going to listen to that in his music. Everything he does, there are 10 styles of music in a 5-minute song, and somehow he makes it work. I don't think it's very different from what happens in other kinds of fusion of music, but he decides to concentrate in different things. But I think the more you listen to music that incorporates elements of other styles, the more you realize how they're all connected. So, for example, when there's beef between the East Coast rappers and the West Coast rappers, is it really is there a musical reason for that, or is there something other? I think if we understand that, then we have a better chance of understanding each other and actually listening to what each other is saying. Maybe we can leave them with the last one.
Yeah, let's play one more. We got some more people.
What do you guys feel like? All right, so now that you've heard about these styles, what are you curious about to listen to more? Brazilian music, Cuban music, Puerto Rican, jazz fusion from the United States, something more traditional in jazz.
He got a suggestion.
Is there a traditional Honduran style jazz?
Yes, we're actually at the forefront of that. So, I don't know of any one artist from Honduras that has rendered successfully the merging of jazz and other things, because for the most part, there isn't really jazz academia in those countries. So people might play the repertoire, but when it comes to improvisation and understanding the harmony, pedagogy is behind in those countries because there's not an infrastructure to help that develop. However, in our endeavors, in our trying to find a fresh sound, we found a way of mixing bachata and punta and jazz harmony within this one song that we call A Huevo. Yeah, I think that should be a good one. So, just a quick rehearsal here. Different from what we did yesterday, is not cut the proper pattern. Just follow on, play your phrases, and then start improvising. And this will be for this. If you play them 2 times before and then start improvising, then go back to them so we know the song is about to finish. We sing on top of you, don't ever stop playing. Okay. And then we do the trash can. Trash can. Okay, here we go. This is A Huevo, a bachata that turns into a punta with jazz harmony. Thank you very much again.